The rope touched the rock before anyone saw the island. A dull scrape. Soft. Accidental. Almost careful. But in the silence of the sea, it sounded like a mistake. No one spoke. Below them, the water moved without light. Thick, black, swallowing the reflection of the sky. It didn't shimmer. It absorbed. One by one, they climbed. Boots pressed into wet stone. Fingers searched for holds that couldn't be seen, only trusted. Breathing stayed controlled. Measured. Borrowed. The cliff did not welcome them. It simply allowed them. By the time the first man reached the top, the fog had already claimed the land. Low. Restless. Moving like something alive. Lieutenant James Hawk pulled himself over the edge and didn't stand immediately. He stayed low, one hand still gripping the rock, listening. The island of Sark did not look occupied. That was the problem. No lights. No voices. No distant machinery. Just wind, moving through grass and broken fences like a whisper trying not to be heard. Behind him, another hand reached the edge. Then another. 12 men in total. No insignia. No names spoken. Only purpose. They had been told the mission would be quiet. In. Extract a prisoner. Out. Proof. That was all command wanted, proof that the Germans could be touched. Even here. Especially here. The Channel Islands were more than territory. They were a message. And tonight, they were supposed to send one back. Hawk raised his hand. The group froze instantly. Something had changed. Not the wind. Not the fog. Something else. He tilted his head slightly. There. A sound. Metal. Faint. Rhythmic. Too controlled to be accidental. Someone awake. They moved inland. Slowly. Every step deliberate. The ground was damp beneath their boots, the grass bending without resistance. No gravel. No leaves. Nothing that could betray them. Even the island seemed to cooperate. And that made it worse. Sergeant Miller leaned closer, barely a shape in the fog. You feel that? Hawk didn't answer. Because he did. That quiet tension that had nothing to do with training. Nothing to do with orders. The kind that sat in your chest and waited. The first structure emerged gradually. Not built, revealed. A stone house. Low. Uneven. Its outline broken by shadow. The windows were black. Not dark. Black. As if light had been removed from them entirely. Hawk studied it. Too still. Too perfect. Then he saw the door. Slightly open. Just enough to notice. Just enough to matter. He gestured. 2 men peeled off. Miller among them. They approached without a sound, weapons low but ready. Each step measured against breath. Each breath measured against silence. The door moved with almost no resistance. Just a faint creak, thin and sharp, like something fragile breaking far away. All of them felt it. Too loud. Inside, the air was different. Warmer. Not by much, but enough. Enough to tell the truth. Someone had been here. Recently. A table. A chair. A cup. Miller touched it. Paused. Then looked back. Still warm. Hawk stepped in. The room adjusted around him slowly, as his eyes pulled shapes out of the dark. Nothing disturbed. Nothing overturned. No signs of fear. Which meant no warning. Then a shape in the corner. Too solid to be shadow. Too still to be empty. Hawk raised his weapon. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just inevitably. Hands. Quiet. Controlled. The word barely existed in the room. Nothing. Only wind brushing the outer wall. And somewhere far off, that metallic sound again. Closer now. Miller shifted his weight. One careful step forward. The floor responded with the faintest complaint. And then movement. Sudden. Alive. The figure separated from the dark. A man. German. Young. Too young. His hands came up immediately, not reaching, not resisting. Just surrendering. "Nick Skiason," he whispered. "Don't shoot." For a moment, no one moved. Not even the fog outside. Hawk studied him. The uniform didn't sit right. Not battle-worn. Not prepared. This wasn't a man expecting a raid. This was a man interrupted by one. "How many?" Hawk asked quietly. The German hesitated. Not out of defiance. Out of calculation. Or fear. Before he could answer. Footsteps. Outside. Multiple. Not hiding. Not careful. Miller turned his head slightly. "That's not a patrol." The German's eyes shifted. Not toward the door. Toward Hawk. And in that glance, there was something else. Something worse than fear. Expectation. Hawk felt it immediately. The mission was no longer quiet. It was no longer controlled. And it was no longer theirs. He stepped closer to the prisoner. "How many?" This time, sharper. Closer. The German opened his mouth. A sound cut through the night. Clean. Mechanical. Final. A rifle bolt. Drawn back. Locked into place. Then a voice. Outside. Firm. Commanding. In German. Too confident. Too ready. They weren't searching. They weren't reacting. They were waiting. Miller exhaled slowly. We walked into it. Hawk closed his eyes. Just for a second. As if trying to hold on to the version of the mission that still made sense. When he opened them, it was gone. "Positions," he whispered. The fog outside shifted. Not drifting. Moving. As if something inside it had decided to step forward. The footsteps stopped. Right at the door. Silence. Heavy. Pressing. Then, the handle moved. And the door burst open. The first thing that moved wasn't the door. It was the air. As it shifted inward, cold, sharp, carrying the outside with it. Then came the silhouette. A rifle first. Then the man behind it. No one fired. Not yet. For a fraction of a second, both sides simply existed in the same space. Breathing. Watching. Measuring. The German soldier at the door didn't rush in. He didn't shout. He didn't even fully step inside. He just stood there, framed by fog, weapon steady, eyes scanning the room as if confirming something he already knew. Behind him. Shapes. More rifles. More men. Unclear how many. Clear enough that it didn't matter. Hawk didn't lower his weapon. But he didn't raise it further either. Because this wasn't a firefight yet. This was something else. Something quieter. More fragile. The captured German shifted slightly beside him. A mistake. Small. Instinctive. The soldier at the door noticed. His rifle moved, not wildly, not aggressively. Just, precisely. Now aimed at the prisoner. Not at Hawk. Not at the commandos. At him. A message. Clear. Immediate. Miller whispered, barely audible. They don't care about us. Hawk understood instantly. This wasn't about stopping an attack. This was about control. About preventing something. Or someone. From leaving. Outside, the fog moved again. And with it, more footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Encircling. The room felt smaller now. Not physically. But in options. Drop it, the German at the door said. His English was careful. Learned. Not comfortable. No one moved. The prisoner next to Hawk trembled. Not from fear of death. But from something heavier. Something already decided. Hawk leaned slightly toward him. Quiet enough that it barely formed sound. What did you see? The man's lips parted. No voice came out. The rifle at the door shifted again. A fraction. Closer. Drop it, the soldier repeated. More force this time. Still controlled. Still calm. Hawk exhaled slowly. Time stretched. Each second widening into something dangerous. Because the longer no one moved, the more fragile everything became. Behind him, one of the commandos adjusted his stance. A soft scrape of boot against stone. Tiny. But enough. The German outside reacted instantly. A second rifle appeared beside the first. Then a third. They were not improvising. They were positioned. Waiting. Prepared. Miller's voice again, barely a breath. We're surrounded. Hawk knew. But knowing didn't solve anything. The mission had already changed. Capture had turned into survival. Silence had turned into exposure. And now, every decision would carry weight beyond the room. The prisoner suddenly spoke. Soft. Fast. In German. The soldier at the door snapped something back. Sharp. Short. A command. The prisoner froze. Then slowly, he lowered his eyes. Hawk watched it happen. That moment, when resistance didn't just fade. It disappeared. Something passed between them. Not language. Understanding. They'll kill him, Miller whispered. Hawk didn't respond. Because the truth was already in the room. The German at the door took one step forward. Not enough to enter fully. Just enough to make the line clear. Last time, he said. Drop. Weapons. Silence. The wind pressed against the walls. The fog curled through the doorway. The island itself seemed to hold its breath. Hawk's grip tightened slightly on his weapon. Not raising. Not lowering. Balanced. He looked at the prisoner. At the fear. At the resignation. At the knowledge that this man, whatever he knew, was the reason they were here. And the reason they might not leave. Another voice outside. Different. Older. Speaking German. Calm. Measured. Authority. The soldier at the door straightened slightly. Just enough to acknowledge it. Then, a decision point. Invisible. But absolute. Hawk lowered his weapon. Slowly. Deliberately. Until the barrel pointed toward the floor. Behind him. A hesitation. A fracture in discipline. "Sir," Miller started. "Do it," Hawk said quietly. One by one. Reluctantly. The others followed. Metal lowering. Not dropped. But surrendered enough. The tension didn't disappear. It changed shape. The German at the door studied them. Then gave a small nod. Two soldiers entered. Careful. Precise. Weapons still raised. They moved toward the prisoner first. Not the commandos. Never the commandos. The man flinched as they grabbed him. Not resisting. Not fighting. Just yielding. Hawk felt something shift again. Something worse than before. This wasn't an ambush. This was containment. "What is he?" Hawk asked. No answer. The older voice outside spoke again. Closer now. Footsteps followed. Slow. Measured. A figure appeared behind the soldiers. Not rushed. Not tense. Controlled. An officer. His uniform was immaculate. Too clean for this place. Too composed for this moment. He stepped into the doorway. And stopped. His eyes moved across the room. Taking everything in. The weapons. The men. The silence. Then he looked at Hawk. Not with anger. Not with urgency. With recognition. As if this moment had always been expected. "You came for prisoners," he said calmly. Hawk didn't answer. The officer tilted his head slightly. Almost curious. "And now," he continued, "you are inside the wrong story." The wind rose outside. Low. Constant. The prisoner was pulled past them. Toward the fog. Hawk watched him go. Every instinct telling him. This was the moment. The last moment. Before everything changed. "Stop," he said. The word cut through the room. The soldiers froze. Not out of obedience. Out of surprise. The officer looked back at him. And for the first time, there was something in his expression. Interest. "On what grounds?" he asked quietly. Hawk stepped forward. One pace. Measured. "On mine." Silence. The fog pressed closer to the doorway. Swallowing the edges of the world. The officer studied him. Longer this time. Then, very slightly, he smiled. Not warm. Not amused. Certain. And outside. A safety clicked off. The safety clicked somewhere in the fog. Not loud. Not dramatic. But final. Like a door closing in another room you can't reach. No one moved. Because now, movement meant commitment. And commitment meant consequence. The officer didn't turn toward the sound. He already knew it was there. Instead, his eyes stayed on Hawk. Measuring. Not the weapon. Not the uniform. The decision. "You misunderstand your position," he said quietly. Hawk didn't respond. Because he understood it perfectly. Behind him, Miller shifted slightly. Not enough to provoke. Enough to signal. We don't have time. The prisoner struggled weakly in the grip of the two soldiers. Not to escape. But as if something inside him hadn't finished yet. Something unsaid. "Bit," he whispered. No one translated. No one needed to. The officer finally stepped fully into the room. The fog followed him. Curling around his boots. Settling behind him like something that belonged to him. "You came here for proof," he continued. "Something to carry back across the water." A pause. Just long enough to let the next words land. "You found it." Hawk's grip tightened again. Not on the trigger. On control. "What is he?" Hawk asked. This time, louder. The officer glanced briefly at the prisoner. Then back. "A complication," he said. "Not a rank. Not a name. Not even a role. Just a problem." Outside, the wind shifted direction. It pressed against the open doorway, pushing the fog deeper inside. The room began to lose its edges. Walls fading. Corners dissolving. Miller leaned closer. "If they move him out there, we lose him." Hawk knew. And more than that. He knew they wouldn't get another chance. The mission had already failed once. Quiet entry. Gone. Surprise. Gone. Control. Gone. All that remained was decision. The prisoner suddenly twisted harder. A sharp movement. Desperate. One of the German soldiers struck him. Not violently. Efficiently. Enough to stop the motion. The sound echoed in the room. Short. Dry. Unnecessary. Hawk flinched. Not outwardly. But enough. And the officer saw it. "There," he said softly. "That is the difference." Hawk's eyes snapped back to him. "You hesitate. A beat. We do not." Silence filled the space again. Heavy. Unavoidable. Hawk stepped forward. Another pace. Closing distance. Reducing options. "Let him go," he said. It wasn't a request. Not anymore. Behind him, Miller inhaled sharply. Because now, there was no returning to quiet. The soldiers holding the prisoner tightened their grip. Not reacting. Preparing. The officer tilted his head slightly. Studying Hawk as if the answer had already been decided somewhere else. "And if I don't?" The question hung there. Simple. Clean. Deadly. Hawk didn't answer immediately. Because there were only two answers. And both led to the same place. The wind outside dropped suddenly. As if the island itself had paused to listen. Then, very slowly, Hawk raised his weapon again. Not fast. Not aggressive. Inevitable. Behind him. Metal followed. One by one. The commandos mirrored the motion. Training overriding doubt. The German soldiers reacted instantly. Rifles snapping up. Angles tightening. Distance collapsing. The room was no longer a room. It was a trigger. Waiting. The officer didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't even look at the weapons now pointed in every direction. Instead, he watched Hawk. And then, quietly, he nodded. Not approval. Not agreement. Recognition. "So," he said. "This is how it ends." The prisoner's breathing quickened. Sharp. Uneven. Neen," he whispered. Hawk's finger rested against the trigger. Not pulling. Not relaxing. Balance between two futures. A thought passed through him. Fast. Clear. Uninvited. This was never about taking a prisoner. It was about what they would do when they couldn't. Outside. Another safety clicked. Then another. Then several more. Too many. Miller's voice, low, urgent. "Sir, we don't win this." Hawk knew. This wasn't a fight they could win. Not here. Not like this. But winning had stopped being the objective. The officer took one step closer, closing the last of the space between them. "No one needs to die here," he said. And for the first time, there was something almost human in his voice. "Lower your weapons," he continued. "And you leave." A pause. Without him. The words settled slowly. Like dust. Behind Hawk. A shift. Not movement. Realization. This was the choice. Stripped of orders. Stripped of mission. Stripped of illusion. Take the man. And die here. Or leave. And carry the failure back. The prisoner looked at Hawk. Truly looked. And in his eyes, there was no hope. Only understanding. A silent answer. Hawk's grip tightened once more. Then loosened. Just slightly. Time stretched. Longer than it should. Longer than it could. And then, from outside, a shout. Urgent. Unplanned. The officer's head turned. Just enough. A crack followed. Sharp. Violent. A gunshot. Everything broke. The shot did not echo. It vanished into the fog. Swallowed before it could become memory. For a fraction of a second. No one understood who had fired. Or why. Then everything moved at once. The prisoner collapsed. Not slowly. Not dramatically. Like something cut loose. The soldiers holding him released instinctively. Not out of mercy. But surprise. Hawk turned toward the sound. Too late to stop it. Too late to change it. A German rifleman stood just beyond the doorway. His weapon still raised. Still steady. As if nothing unusual had happened. The officer didn't shout. Didn't react with anger. He simply looked at the body. Then at the soldier. A pause. Thin. Dangerous. "Warm?" he asked quietly. "Why?" The soldier hesitated. Just for a moment. "Wollt fliehen," he replied. He was trying to escape. It wasn't true. Everyone in the room knew it. But truth had already left the island. The officer studied him. Long enough to make the silence heavy. Then, he nodded. Not agreement. Not forgiveness. Acceptance. The body on the floor didn't move. Wouldn't move. Whatever the prisoner carried. Whatever he knew. Ended here. Hawk felt something hollow open inside him. Not anger. Not grief. Something quieter. More permanent. It had all led to this. The climb. The silence. The careful steps. And now. Nothing. Miller spoke first. Low. Flat. "We came for him." No one answered. Because there was nothing left to take. The officer turned back to Hawk. "It is finished," he said. Not as a statement. As a boundary. Outside, the fog began to thin. Just slightly. Enough to reveal shapes where before there had been none. More soldiers. More rifles. More certainty. Hawk lowered his weapon. Not in surrender. In conclusion. Behind him, the others followed. Slower this time. Heavier. The room felt different now. Larger. Emptier. As if the tension that had filled it had simply drained away. leaving only consequence. You will leave, the officer said. A pause. You will say nothing of this. Hawk looked at him. Really looked this time. At the uniform that remained untouched. At the composure that hadn't cracked. At the control that never slipped. You think this disappears? Hawk asked. The officer considered that. Then, very slightly, he shook his head. No, he said. Another pause. But it changes shape. The wind moved through the doorway again. Lighter now. Less oppressive. The body remained where it had fallen. Uncovered. Unmoved. Hawk glanced at it once more. Not out of duty. Not even curiosity. Recognition. That this, not the mission, was what would stay. Move, Miller whispered. The commandos turned. One by one. Stepping past the threshold. Back into the fog. No one stopped them. No one followed. The island released them the same way it had taken them. Quietly. Without resistance. The descent down the cliff was slower. Not because of difficulty. Because of weight. Boots found the rope. Hands followed. Muscle memory took over where thought no longer could. Below, the sea waited. Unchanged. Unconcerned. As Hawk reached the bottom, he looked up once. The island was already fading. Swallowed again by mist. As if none of it had happened. But it had. And it would not stay here. Days later, the report would be written. Short. Controlled. Careful. A successful landing. Enemy contact. One prisoner taken. Then, complications. What the report would not say. What it could not carry. Was the moment inside that room. The hesitation. The choice. The silence after. And what followed beyond the island. Because the raid on Sark did not end that night. It continued. In response. In retaliation. In decisions made far from the fog. Orders would be issued. Harsh ones. Final ones. Not because of victory. But because of fear. And misunderstanding. What happened in silence? Echoed loudly elsewhere. Hawk would remember one thing. Not the shot. Not the officer. Not even the mission. But the moment before. When everything could still change. And didn't. The sea moved against the rocks. Slow. Endless. Indifferent. As if war itself were just another tide. Rising. Falling. Leaving behind only what could not be taken back. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to help us remember and share stories from the front lines. Stories from the past help us understand humanity in difficult times. Share your thoughts in the comments, every memory matters.